Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us on our virtual masterclass this afternoon. Today's masterclass is hosted by Colin Robbins, who is our East Midlands branch chair. Thank you so much for hosting the session, Colin. This session is on the very murky world of cybercrime. Before we get to the exciting part, and before I can hand you over to Colin, I will just run through the branch house rules that we have. Just to say that you will be muted during the webinar, but don't worry, there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask lots of questions at the end of the session after the two presentations. But if you do have any questions that you think of, do type those over to us in the Q&A box, and I'll make sure those are read out for you afterwards. Just another one, hopefully you don't have any issues, but if you do have any tech problems, then please bring it to our attention through either the raise hand icon or probably better to email support@cysec.org, and a member of our team will be on the other end and we'll be able to pick that up for you. There we go, so that was quickly done. Over to you, Colin. So to introduce your chairman with some exciting news.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Sophie, and welcome everybody to the Cysec Masterclass looking at cybercrime. So I'm going to be your host this afternoon. As it says here, the host from the Nottingham, Derby and Leicester branch. We were formerly known as the East Midlands branch, but we've decided to change our name to Nottingham, Derby, Leicester, which really is a reflection of reality of where our members come from. But it also creates some space for Northampton and Lincoln to start doing their own things, because they've got some very active security communities in those regions, but for sort of travel logistics and things like that weren't as active in the branch as they could have been. So it's really just a reflection of reality, really. So we've decided to focus it on Nottingham, Derby and Leicester. I'd also like to introduce Dawn O'Connor, who's going to be helping me run the branch going forward. And Dawn has very kindly volunteered to do a write-up of this meeting for the Pulse magazine. So we'll talk a bit more about Pulse at the end. Now, within the East Midlands branch, our mission has always been about creating a peer networking environment where we can talk about some of the things associated with our trade. We've tried to get beyond vendors telling us how their latest gizmo is going to solve all of our issues. And so as a branch, we have been active during lockdown, this being our second event. The first was done jointly with the British Computer Society, Nottingham and Derby branch, and focused on IoT security. And I'm very pleased to welcome some members of the British Computer Society to this event too. And working with them, we are in the planning stages of a second event. And so kind of watch this space, and we'll communicate as soon as we have something that we can talk about. Lockdown's been clearly a challenge for the way we all operate as well as a branch, but with things starting to ease, we are tentatively planning a socially distanced event for later in the year. That does mean that our numbers will be severely limited. And so if we do able to put a socially distanced event on, it will be for Cysec members only. And what we'll be doing is making a provision for non-Cysec members to join via Zoom. So now would be a really good time to get your application in if you're not a member. Or if either of those events you would like to contribute as a speaker, then please let either myself or Dawn know, and we can start looking at what the options are. Now, until lockdown, we met every 3 months approximately. And the last 4 meetings were very kindly hosted by an organisation called EMSU, which some of you may or may not be aware of. It stands for the East Midlands Special Operations Unit, which is the East Midlands part of the regional organised crime unit. And they're focusing on sort of intelligence gathering and disruption and investigation of serious and organised criminals, it says here. So I'm very delighted today that we can extend the Cysec and our branch's relationship with law enforcement in the region. And today we're going to be hearing from the cybercrime unit of Leicestershire Police. So without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to Detective Sergeant 2877, also known as Charles Edwards, who's going to talk to us about how the police are operating and working within the cybercrime world. And then it's going to be followed by Samantha Haycock, who's a Cyber Protect Officer at Leicestershire Police. We'll be talking about some of the crimes that they are seeing and providing some prevention advice alongside that. So yeah, so please, yeah, we'd like to welcome Charlie to the call.
Thank you very much, and I promise you all, I'm not covert. I'm just having the usual technical issues we do with the police when we get involved with this type of thing. So unfortunately, no video, but that might be a blessing for many. So thank you ever so much for inviting us both along. Very short background. I am a digital hub supervisor here. I look after cybercrime and the DMIs, Digital Media Investigators, Leicestershire Police, and I am a bit of a geek, always have been, so I've always been keen to get into this area of business, but I have had the joys of dealing with drunken idiots on a Friday and Saturday evening in town before I got to this role. I am a full member of CSEC. We have our own route in through the College of Policing, where we also have to peer review and justify our entry, and I've got a master's in the area of computer forensic examination. And Sam, who I'll let introduce herself later on, is our dedicated Cyber Protect Officer. She's there to go out in amongst everyone and give them the best advice to keep themselves safe online, be it individuals, networks, or communities. So today we're going to go through quite quickly, hopefully quickly to keep everyone entertained, but also to encourage some questions. We're going to go through, if you go on to the next slide, sorry Sam. I've not got control, unfortunately. So the contents of today, so we've got cybercrime, cybersecurity. You all probably know that as well, if not better than I do. So we'll go through that quite quickly, but it's just to give a bit of a background of what we do. I'm also going to go through who deals with cybercrime. No longer is it the national only, it's now supported regionally and locally. It is nice to know that every single police force, all 43, have their own cybercrime team. That's been a national change in the last couple of years. Going to go through how we deal with it, and then the big thing really is what should you do, what would we like you to do, and then some hopefully quite clear takeaway messages, because they're the key thing. You know, I don't expect you to be able to repeat what I said verbatim. Probably large chunks of it you already know, but actually there's some key messages we want. So cybercrime, probably speaking to the converted, but actually, why such a fuss? Well, what is nice is that it's a tier 1 government risk. It's up there with national disaster. It's up there with terrorism. It's up there with really the kind of the big boys of the world. But also locally, it is a strategic priority of Leicestershire Police. Okay, we take it seriously, which is nice because if you went back 5 years ago, you probably would have been laughed off the stage if we tried to suggest that online crime was going to be the next big thing. Now there are more crimes online than offline. Why would you risk all the clever things we can do of doing a crime offline? You know, going into a bank, robbing money, trying to get away with it. Well, you risk vehicles being seen, being stopped. You risk CCTV, you risk identification. Why do that when you can sit in your back garden, in your study, several thousand miles away in some places and still get as much money? So why bother? And then the big thing for me is it's the when, not the if. There's probably very, very few people listening to this who have not been the target of a cybercrime. Hopefully, they've been clever enough or they've been lucky enough not to be affected, but actually everyone will have been targeted in some way. And a lot of the time we don't know. We don't realise until something else goes wrong. So the big things for us, cybercrime v cybersecurity, the wonderful definitions we all like to use, which I'll go into a bit more detail, but cybercrime for us is any offence that can be used through technical device or the internet. It's that wide-ranging, okay? We are going to concentrate on one area today, which is cyber-dependent crime, which is basically computer on computer, okay? And cybersecurity is as simple as it's protecting yourself, your organisation, and the people you work with and work for, okay, in today's world. But really, really importantly, it's people, process, and technology. If you have one of them fail, you're going to be in all kinds of danger. So actually, we can't rely on one or two of them. So yeah, here's the token definition, straight from Wikipedia, because none of us really like it, but it kind of makes sense. That is what we have to get out there. We need to get this message to people that cybercrime is anything. A few examples we've got. So we've got things that won't affect as many people, but are really quite upsetting some. We've got gaming platforms being taken down. That costs Sony millions. We've got members of parliament email accounts accessed. quite amusing for some, but big potential damage. We've got the organised crime groups overseas infiltrating CNI. People joke, people laugh about, it was the Russians, it was the Chinese. No, it is. It's happening, and it's happening quite regularly. Okay, but actually, we are also working to deal with it. We've got companies getting their files deleted by disgruntled past employees. That's quite a common one. It's quite scary how lax certain companies can be around removing permissions. Ransomware installed from computer emails, very common one, and that happens very, very often. We've had a school website in Leicester defaced with a Free Palestine message. Very little impact, really, in the grand scheme of things. I don't think many activists are going to be reading it, but what it did do is cause big issues in school and embarrassment. And many more. You can all probably think of hundreds of thousands of different cybercrimes. There are that many. It's quite scary. What can happen offline now can happen online, and is cybercrime. So who deals with it? Okay, so this is a bit of a timeline. So we started off in May 2016, where actually we thought we'd get a bit ahead of the curve. So we, as a force, were quite lucky. We had Mr. Goodman, who's Derbyshire Chief Constable, is the national lead on cybercrime. And what he did was say, this isn't going away. I don't think the internet's going to be turned off anytime soon. We need to start recruiting. And very fortunately for us, more fortunately than the rest of the region, we had a Chief Constable and Chief Officer team who agreed. So back then we recruited a Detective Sergeant and a Detective Constable. That was myself and a Detective Constable. And we have ever since then dealt primarily with cyber-dependent crime. So we're talking about the hackings, talking about the DDoS, we're talking about the website defacements, talking about the ransomware and malware. Okay, that is our day job. I don't do this as a kind of a second hat. That is what we do. Not long after, we realised that actually we're not that bad at locking up baddies. We're really quite bad at giving people the advice to not get them a victim in the first place. And Sam came on board. So Sam's been doing this for quite a long time now. I think it was October 2016. And actually we had a dedicated team who, very strangely in the police, were not just there to lock up the baddies, but were there to stop people being victims in the first place. As the police, we are generally quite reactive, as I'm sure you can imagine. Then, what was really quite interesting was national funding came in February 2017, which meant that lots of other forces started to play a bit of catch-up, and we got lots of training, we got lots of equipment. It kind of put us on a decent steading to deal with most things. Up to that point, there was probably a certain amount of a token gesture. Say, look, we have dedicated people, but actually, could we deal with it as well as industry? No, we couldn't. And again, some would argue probably can't in some ways now. We got a second DC recruited, again ahead of the curve, because in June, we had lots of other forces create teams. So this was a year and a bit after national funding became available. Other teams started to come into play. At that point, we decided that actually we need to get into a different community, a different area. So we had a cyber community support officer. So I'm sure you've all heard of police community support officers that walk around on the beat and have a chat to people. Well, that's kind of what we wanted, but in the online world. And actually, we now have 2 part-time, and what they do is they go and give the exact same advice they would give out in the street, but online to people. Okay, and it makes a big impact. And quite recently, we've had a 3rd detective, because actually this world is growing. Even before the pandemic hitting now, this was an area of growth. Now, while we've got lots of people who aren't allowed out of the house, or shouldn't go out of the house, we've got lots of idle hands at home doing things they shouldn't do. Okay, and that is just for cyber-dependent crime. Okay, if we go into the other realms of cybercrime I've spoken about, we talk about the paedophile online elements. We talk about the economic crime, the frauds. They have their own dedicated units. In Leicester Police, we probably have in excess of 100 people now, maybe 150, who primarily just look at online offences. And obviously that comes with lots and lots and lots of training. But then the slightly worrying thing is the funding ends rather abruptly at the end of this financial year. And that's where we have to, I guess, reassure people that this was not cliff edge funding, as originally it was seen, where it's going to drop off. This was seed funding. This was giving us the initial capital, the initial support needed to get these teams up and running. Our team is now fully established, so if the money ended up tomorrow, we have the wages paid, we have the ongoing costs paid, and that's what has to be. So that's where we are. So that's the local picture. So to go into a bit bigger then, so regionally, Colin's mentioned quite rightly, EMSU, East Midlands Special Operations Unit, they've been doing this for quite a lot longer. They've been doing this since 2014, but quite strangely, or a little bit unexpectedly, when we created force teams, they've actually lost a lot of their capability because we've kept things locally. If you don't do something so often, you lose the competence. So quite recently, what we've done now is we've upskilled them in other areas that are just as important and actually a bit more specialist. So they will give technical support, some really high level things. I can't go into tactics, obviously, due to the nature of things, but actually, is there a reason why, if we're engaging with people now who are clever enough to hide where they're coming from, the use of Tor, proxies, VPNs, well, we need ways around it. So why don't we create files that when they're clicked on, in exactly the same way a criminal will, it will give us access to someone's computer. It will call out where they're from. That's where we go to. RockU have that capability. They have a conduit to national agencies and tactics. And the nice thing as well is they create a really good holistic oversight around the management of groups, because there are now organised crime groups in this world. Again, like I said earlier, why would they risk selling guns and drugs when they can make more money online? Also, what they do is they've got a range of support specialists, which are listed there. Okay, and actually, it's the dedication of teams that are really useful for us to tap into. So it might well be that every force can't have its own prevent specialists, so they're the ones that will divert people. What we can do is have one as a region and tap into it. And the other thing they're doing, which Sam will mention briefly later, is they are helping design regional developments, such as the Midlands Cyber Resilience Centre, that I'll probably take a couple of questions on at the end, because that's something that's quite new and upcoming. So nationally, most people will have heard of these or seen the logos. National Crime Agency is obviously the overarching international and national crime police force per se. Within there, they have the National Cybercrime Unit, who lead on national. We have GCHQ, the Intelligence Centre, and within there, they have the National Cybersecurity Centre, which again, hopefully you've all heard of. And then we have Action Fraud. What these do is they provide a means of collating, assessing, and triaging cybercrimes that come in, but also they can pick up those crimes that need a national response, that are going to have such an impact on the country, they need to be dealt with at that scale. Okay, they have a real high-level range of specialists, not just within the UK, also overseas, and actually they can go into other countries and deal with things that we just can't. So if I come up with an example that we've had ransomware recently, which we, through our work, identified came back to Ukraine, clearly myself and my 3 detectives are not going to be popping over there on a weekend. But actually, once we build up a picture that this group is affecting hundreds of companies nationally and thousands internationally, working with partners, then actually enforcement comes on board, and the NCA led on that, working with the overseas agencies, including Europol, Interpol, etc. So Action Fraud I mentioned briefly. Action Fraud is a big part of what we do, because unlike every other area of policing, this very quickly goes outside one jurisdiction. In the old days, it used to be, say we talk about a burglary or a robbery, it was Leicestershire villains in Leicestershire with Leicestershire victims. If we have all 3 in the same place for cybercrime, then we have probably won the lottery. It's incredibly rare. So we use Action Fraud, which is the national reporting system. Incredibly bad press, incredibly clunky, not very useful for businesses, but it's getting there, partly because some of it's been taken off them. But what they do is they provide myself and all the supervisory nationally every week with an understanding of what's going on around the country. And that could not be more vital. So then what do we deal with? Just to give you a couple of examples, and they are very quick examples. Locally, we would deal with, say, ransomware of a school. There's a school in Glenfield this week that got hit by ransomware. They had insecure and poorly updated software that allowed ransomware in. We regularly deal with unauthorized access to businesses. We regularly deal with extortions that are going on against businesses and hacking. But actually, it will normally be where the footprint is a single location or all within our county. If we go a bit higher, then actually we start to use EMSU, who it might be less police officers dealing with it, but EMSU has some oversight. They provide the intelligence support for cross-border work. So I don't want to be spending lots of time dealing with a piece of ransomware when actually someone up in, say, Sheffield or someone up in Cumbria has done the exact same work already with duplicating. So they allow us to do that. They also deal with any data exfiltration of risk data. So it might be that Rolls-Royce got targeted and customer details taken. Well, actually, they will deal with some of that because they have better access in. And the other side of it is NCA. So they will often do a lot of the international work. So I don't know if people are aware, recently there's been the Blue Leaks, which was a law enforcement database that was breached and leaked. NCA will take the lead on the dissemination of that product out. We will deal with it, but they will have that oversight and have that. They can identify state actors and deal with them to a certain degree. They deal with national infrastructure elements on a more regular basis. and they do a lot of the exploitation of software and hardware at scale, but also they mitigate at scale. So if we had a big breach of data, such as when LCFC, Talk got hit, well, actually, they will be the ones that will put out that mass information around what people can do to support themselves. So then just examples from the newspapers or similar. Very recently, we dealt with Leicester City Football Club had a breach. I don't know if everyone's aware, but it was quite a big thing at the time. And that was where hackers managed to find a weakness in the SQL database of the sales site and were scraping credit card details. About 18,000 people affected. Okay, doesn't sound like a huge amount until you realise that 18,000 people whose credit card details are out there for sale on the dark web and for your use. We then go to region, dealt with Lincolnshire County Council because of the nature of the lack of confidence in the council from it and the size of it. They dealt with that with some support. So I've talked about us having 3 detectives in Leicestershire. Well, actually, there's 12 now across the East Midlands. So MSU can help get that mutual aid support across. And then last but not least, NCA dealt with a job that everyone's probably fully aware of, which was the cyber attack on Parliament, which left the MP unable to access emails. That's not the end of the world. That might do some good. But actually, what it also did was potentially give a lot of access to data within. Okay. So on to how we deal with cybercrime. I don't know if you've heard of the 4P process. The 4Ps are protect, prevent, prepare, pursue. Okay. They are based on counter-terrorism, because this has worked in the counter-terrorism world for a long, long time, and we don't really like to reinvent the wheel, as fun as it can be. The idea being that actually we should protect people by raising their awareness, giving them advice, and making sure they understand what's out there. That is Sam's main job. We should prevent it happening by identifying those people who are going to offend, stopping them, and trying to get them to use their skills for better use. But you need to realise that that is very different to the world of terrorism, where actually it's very rare that someone can use their idealism for a positive, whereas actually in the world of cybercrime, if someone has a skill, has an ability, that can be used very readily. And actually we're now more and more supporting people when we get to them at the right stage to get work, because that can be really beneficial. We prepare because we understand that actually it's not an if, it is a when people are going to be affected, so we need to make sure people have contingency plans in place. Business continuity is a big thing now in the world of cybercrime. If I went back a few years, the number of agencies that were fully prepared for a fire or a flood or a pandemic, but were not ready for if a virus got into their systems, despite the fact they'd put all their systems on VoIP, they didn't have an offline phone record, they couldn't tell people what's going on. It was painful. So we're doing a lot of work around that. And then pursue, which I've put at the bottom, it's the smallest P for a reason, is that's when everything's gone wrong. And unfortunately, crime has happened and we need to lock up those who are doing it. That is what my 3 detectives primarily do, but actually, amongst the team, we look at all of them, and we need to make sure we do it right. So how do we even know what to look at? It's really key that we have national and local. So nationally, every year we get an assessment, which I can't share out. That front few pages are fine, but actually that gives us an understanding of what is going on nationally. So when I'm looking at the budget for training, for equipment, for staff, I know actually what to look at. We get a dashboard and we get a local dashboard, and these are remarkably similar, which is actually quite nice. We kind of mirror the national picture. They give me an understanding about what the big issues are, because I won't be investigating every cybercrime that happens, because some of them will not have any lines of inquiry, will not be investigatable, if that makes any sense. But actually I still need to know they're happening, so I still need to know what the next big thing could be. I still need to know that if data breaches are happening, ID fraud will probably come from it. So that's what we look at, and we get some good intelligence from that. So then what we do is we look at what we can do if people fall victim, and Sam will go into this a little bit as well. We want people to report them to action fraud, okay? But actually, if this is an immediate threat, in the same way that if it was a risk to someone's life, it was a risk to your business, don't ring action fraud, ring the police. We will take it directly off you. And we have had calls on the 999. It's rarely going to be life at risk, but we will still generally deal with them from there. If you ring up saying that something happened a little while ago, it's not really affecting you now, it's nothing major, you'll probably be asked to go to action fraud, just because then we get that bigger picture nationally. Please be aware of ICO breaches. I'm sure you've all got those considerations in-house, but actually if you have been a target of a cybercrime and you do not know what's happened while a person's been within your server while there's a ransomware, you need to consider contacting the ICO. They'd much rather find out than not. And the amount of money that can be fined can be rather large unless you do tell them. Please don't expect us or expect others to do it on your behalf. We keep reminding people they have to do it. Please consider contractual obligations, obviously with customers, with clients, with chains, because actually the details that have gone missing might not affect you, might affect other people. So you might need to report a serious incident, and other stakeholders, as I've mentioned. So very, very briefly, the action for customer channels we go through. If you need to report something, you can go social media. They're actually quite responsive. But personally, and this goes completely against the national guidance, I would recommend ringing. Okay, the big push is to go online reporting, but actually the issue with online reporting is it will potentially sit in a queue without being risk assessed until someone gets to it. If you put a phone call in, the people that answer the phone have at least enough understanding to be able to say, actually this needs to be shoved up the list a bit. This is a crime in action, something happening now. So that number, 0300 123 2040, is very, very useful. It might be that they recommend you still then go and do some online reporting. You might want to upload stuff, such as logs, but actually put the phone call in. The next page then goes very brief about what happens when you report. It is as simple as it goes into a big database, it is analysed by humans and by software, and then intelligence gets put into a pool, investigative elements get put into a pool, but everything gets collated in one place. And if something comes straight into us through the 9s or through 101, we will then put it back up to action forward afterwards, just to make sure that we are not duplicating work. We understand what's going on. Okay, so then the new system, as things go on, is really just trying to improve that, trying to make sure bulk reporting is there, and also users are able to initiate contact a bit easier. So that is a real quick run through cybercrime as we deal with it as a force and locally and nationally. But now probably the more important part is about how you protect yourselves and some thoughts to be had. So I'll pass over to Sam. I will stay to the end in case you've got any questions. Sam, over to you.
Thank you very much. So, Sam Hancock, I'm the Cyber Protect Officer for Leicestershire Police. So as we've already alluded to, my remit is to support all of our communities in raising cyber awareness and the basic principles on how to stay safer online. Obviously, that job has changed immeasurably in the last few months because normally most days of the week I'm out and about at networking events, going into businesses to run training sessions where there has been an incident, or going to the likes of the University of the Third Age, WI, Probus meetings, etc. And obviously a lot of that hasn't been happening, so we're now finding ourselves trying to deliver in a different means, such as through this. For those members that are in the Leicestershire area, I am available to you to support any training you want for signposting. Obviously my details will be circulated with a copy of the slides after the event, so you are very welcome to make contact with me for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. Oh, we've gone backwards. Do bear with me one moment. I love technology. So in terms of the current threats to business, if we were to put into a list the things that we feel businesses need to be looking at and where employees need to be trained, it's in the risks of ransomware, what that is and how to avoid it. Still huge amounts of issues around phishing emails. That's often where account compromise comes from. Lots of issues regarding mandate fraud, chief exec officer fraud and whaling type issues. And computer service fraud again has reared its head. Seems we've got more people working from home. We have seen incidents of what we call PBX dial through or insecure VoIP type issues, so we offer advice on that. Invoice and funds redirection, which is more cyber enabled but still need to make staff aware. Risks of cyber enabled blackmail and sextortion, whether they are phishing emails or whether it's behaviour outside of the organisation that can cause a risk because of linking social media profiles to the business. And for a couple of years now, we've faced issues regarding banking trojans and again, clicking on links in emails and that sort of thing. But one of our key messages is to push that anyone can be a target or victim. And I use the term target fairly loosely because a lot of small businesses, micro businesses, self-employed people don't have the perception that they are going to be targeted. And in some areas that is correct, but in actual fact, we're not always a specific target. We can be collateral damage. So mass phishing campaigns, etc. It's not you particularly or your business that's been targeted. It's just that unfortunately you've ended up with the results of being involved in that campaign. So I don't like to go down the route of woulda, shoulda, coulda. I do like to give examples of the sort of things that I have dealt with. And I'm going to go two ends of the scale. One was a really big construction materials industry within Leicestershire who were hit by ransomware. They lost access to all their files across all of their sites with no access to a backup copy of files. It took up probably about 5 days before they were back on their feet again. And it cost them approximately £40,000 in paying ransoms to regain access to their files to begin trading. Now, on the one hand, surprisingly, I'm going to say they were quite lucky because they were covered by a very good cyber insurance policy, which means they will be able to get a good proportion of that money back. But on the flip side, it has cost them money in terms of contractual obligations, missed deadlines, etc. And also, no amount of money can help you regain your brand name. So that's really caused them some problems in terms of industry and their reputation and reliability. On the opposite end of the spectrum, a small local vets group. They did have more than one site, again infected with ransomware. That particular incident was quite a clever one. It was a spoofed email that appeared to be from a colleague at one site to a colleague at another site. So without any qualms, that person did click on the alleged spreadsheet to open it, and it encrypted the entire network across all 4 of their premises. Again, unfortunately, they'd got no backup facility at all, and they were forced to pay the Bitcoin ransom. About 2 days disruption and cost them about £3,000, and they regained most of their files, not quite all, but as you can imagine, being the sort of service they are, that had a significant impact on their service to clients across their sites. I did go in to do staff training for them on behalf of the management who wanted the staff to understand the risks, so that was really quite an effective training module we put in place there. Just briefly wanted to mention No More Ransom. I don't know how many people are aware of this site. It is put together by Europol, and when decryption keys become available, they put them on this site. So it needs to be a first port of call to see whether or not you can decrypt free of charge. Obviously, that depends on how old the ransomware is that's being used as part of the attack. Just a reminder regarding risks in relation to Office 365 and OneDrive phishing emails. We've seen a significant number of these, and it's an email, typical phishing email that comes through proffering that there is an issue with the service, and those are 5 of the examples we've seen. As per any phishing campaign, there is always some sense of urgency and a link or a button to click to resolve the issue. Those of you that are familiar with Office 365 and OneDrive will see the login screen on the top right there, but I hasten to add that in actual fact is a duplicate fake site where if you were to enter your details, you would pass those to the fraudster that's contacted you. Very cleverly, it does actually take you to the Microsoft page after you've allegedly logged in, so people don't necessarily suspect that there's an issue. But it's sort of making staff aware of these risks and making it an absolute rule that you never click on any link to log into an account or to resolve an issue. You must always log in via a browser or an app. The only exception to that rule will be where you've instigated an email, such as a password reset type scenario. In relation to reporting suspicious emails and text messages, I've put this in because not everybody's aware that there is now the suspicious email reporting service through Action Fraud. And basically what we're asking is, if you do receive something that appears to be a phishing email or something dodgy, you can forward these to report@finishing.gov.uk, and that's for businesses, it's for charities, it's for members of the public. And basically what happens is they are all received into a central repository. Those links are looked at, and any of those fake sites are taken down. Similarly, there is the 7726 spam reporting service. So if you get one of the current ones at the moment is HSBC, you've added a new payee type text, click here if this wasn't you. Obviously, we don't want people logging in via web links in text messages either, so they can be forwarded to 7726, which spells out spam on your keypad, and again, similarly, those links can be looked at. All nice and simple, so we're trying to spread the word with that, so please do encourage your staff and your contacts to do the same. On to the basics and the sort of things we see then. CEO fraud, whaling, spear phishing, bogus boss email. We get loads of different names for similar types of things, but quite simply, it's somebody senior within an organisation who contacts somebody more junior within the organisation, often within a financial department. They're unable to speak and want to engage via email, and it often occurs when the senior manager's away from the office. So a little bit of research has been done in relation to when that person's away. So a reminder to us, not putting too much information in email auto replies. I'm away at a conference, because if anybody manages to get hold of that, they can then use the correct information in their fake email. So in terms of what to look out for, just have a little quick look at those 3 or 4 lines there. I'll let you digest that. On an interactive session, I would normally ask people to make suggestions in terms of what their observations are with that email. What was glaringly obvious to me was the grammar's not great, as it isn't always in a fake email. And then that term at the bottom, the wire bank transfer, to me, that's an American term rather than one that we tend to use in business here. But rather worryingly, that email was received by a member of staff within an organisation in the East Midlands. More than 12 grand paid out, unquestioned, within 20 minutes of the receipt of the emails. And your staff need to understand that when you instruct a bank to make a payment such as this, the money is very unlikely to be paid or claimed back, because the bank have carried out your instructions correctly based on the information they received from you. So it's really important that we question these sort of things coming in, no matter how good the grammar and spelling is, etc. Computer software service fraud I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. And it's reminding staff of scam calls purporting to be from internet providers. You can even have people masquerading as IT departments within a large organisation. Quite simply, never allow remote connection from an incoming call is our ruling, always hang up. And the new one that's come about since COVID, be very aware of being directed to visit web pages as instructed to run so-called bandwidth test calls. We had an issue within our own organisation that happened to coincide with some internet problems, and unfortunately running the alleged bandwidth test actually allowed access for the offender onto a device. So it's really important that staff that are working remotely, etc., are aware of those risks, and there's more information that you can use for staff training on the Action Fraud website there. Invoice, funds and salary redirection. We just used to call this invoice redirection fraud, but as with anything, fraudsters get clever, they get wiser, they move on. So we've seen various different scenarios where this has been successful. It's not necessarily cyber. It can be a letter that comes through the post with advice on new remittance. We have also seen emails that have gone into schools, allegedly from members of staff, saying that they've changed their bank details and wanting their salary to be paid into a new account. And the basic rule is that we need to challenge all requests to amend any type of account details at all. They should be independently verified using phone numbers that you already have on file rather than anything within the communication. And with the amount of information there is online these days, in terms of logos, addresses, VAT numbers, etc., it's really easy to carry out this sort of thing. What we've got to do is stop it at that last point, which is within the finance department. In relation to the changes that there have been recently in relation to COVID, the National Cybersecurity Centre have put specific information out in relation to home working and security. There is a free online training module for people to undertake. Very easy to use, takes under 30 minutes and covers all the sort of key things we've talked about already, why it's important, how attacks happen, and the key best practice messages. In addition now as well, there are some resources where you can test your resilience in relation to home working. So there are actually what we would call tabletop exercises, except they're online. So I would urge you to make use of those free resources. So we've talked about a lot of doom and gloom there, but there are things we can do to make things better. Absolutely, first of all, our first line of defence is the devices in which we use to access the internet. And I really do hope I'm preaching to the converted, but I've got to mention supported operating systems being an absolute must. And if you need to get this message home to employees that are perhaps using bring your own device type of scenarios, we only have to look at the impact of WannaCry to see how quickly and massively things can actually go very, very wrong. And that was predominantly down to unpatched, out-of-date systems. If we have got something older that you aren't able to update, then we need to move that off the network and use things like memory sticks, etc., to transfer data to mitigate that risk. Antivirus software is a must. And I've put, yes, this does include Apple Macs. Unfortunately, we do see more issues relating to Macs than other types of Apple devices. And absolutely critical, whatever software, apps or programs we used, please make use as soon as the patches are made available. The last alert I put out a week or so ago regarding Microsoft update, there were 125 security flaws fixed in that one update. That's how important they are. So in terms of improving cybersecurity, either as an individual or as organisations and groups, we really want to labour the point of switching on password protection for all users, not allowing group usernames and passwords because we can't always work out where there's an issue should something happen, and really pushing two-factor authentication. I know it takes extra time, but a lot of the things that come into us from action fraud, result in investigation and loss, are because of account compromise. Rule setting in return in terms of your own systems and what you allow people to do. Avoid the predictable passwords, those 25 most common ones. We promote the use of 3 random words as advised by NCSC, trying to encourage that. Helping users cope with password overload. Do you allow one sign-in type scenario? Don't encourage staff to constantly be changing password because that's where we end up using similar ones or the same and writing them down, etc. And making sure, of course, because it does get forgotten, make sure we change default passwords for everything. In terms of improving password policy and more advice and guidance there's a huge amount of information available on NCSC free of charge for you to make use of. Two-factor authentication, another one you can potentially push out to employees. This area is a tutorial. What's really helpful is that no matter what you're using, whether it's PayPal, whether it's Gmail, you type in what it is that you are wanting to put two-factor on, and it gives you a step-by-step instruction. So it's a really helpful bit of kit to push out to your staff, and of course for ourselves and friends and family. £100 is a website that I really do push. In fact, I certainly know that North West Leicestershire District Council have opted to have all of their business email addresses monitored on here, and they've had several incidents where they've had early notification of there being an issue and being able to enforce password change, etc. I must admit, I use it for myself at home. I've encouraged my own family to use it. And I always opt for the notify me option, because that way you don't have to keep going and checking your addresses. And certainly, I think I'm probably right in saying that every breach I've been involved in, this organisation have advised me before the breached organisation. So I really do find it a useful safety net. Where to report, we covered this earlier, but again, I want to major on it. We don't know what's happening unless you tell us what's happening. We're unable to know and put the information out there, so please do use those channels so that we can understand fully what's happening out in the real world. I don't know how many of you are aware of CISP, which is the Cyber Security Information Sharing Partnership, joint industry and government initiative set up to exchange cyber threat information real time. It is secure, it's confidential, it is dynamic. You'll get a lot from it yourselves in terms of being aware of the different types of attacks are happening and how, and it'll allow your IT department to make changes and alter rules and things like that in order to protect the organisation. So it is like an early warning of cyber threats type scenario. It is free of charge. You will need a sponsor for your application. So anybody that's interested from Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, please do use my name and email address, because I can then confirm that you are a legitimate business in the area. If anybody needs details for Nottingham and Derby, I can pass on those to you as well. Cyber Essentials, we really do promote the use of Cyber Essentials. The steps that you have to go through to get to the accreditation really do take you a step above your counterpart businesses. We practice what we preach as well. We've opted to go for Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, in fact. And certainly if you're wanting to work with government type sector projects, you are going to be required to actually have this within your organisation. And then just a recap of the free resources, that's the homepage there. Advice and guidance as education skills, products and services that are available. You can keep up to date by receiving weekly threat reports. There is the National Cyber Security Centre Board Toolkit, which contains a number of different resources to encourage cybersecurity discussions between the board and the tech experts within your organisation, again free of charge. Exercise in a box, for those that haven't heard, there are 8 or 9 scenarios here, which is a bit like an online tabletop exercise, and it tests your resilience to a number of different cyber attacks and fraud issues, so you are able to practice your response in a safe environment. It publicises those results in a little report for you, which they retain for 12 months, so you can keep going back and working on it. And it really does give you the opportunity to see what happens if you follow what you've already got in place and where you would need to improve. Staff training module, as I mentioned, there is the web link there for you to be able to share with staff, and I really would encourage it. It is basic principles, but you might be surprised how many people don't know those basic principles. And then there's an absolute multitude of different free infographics. There's the A to Z fraud guide, lots of different things you could use to drip feed to staff in terms of increasing their knowledge and resilience. And then last but not least, as promised, I was going to mention the East Midlands Cyber Resilience Centre that has been set up. There are being centres set up all over the UK. And in terms of what it is, it's a national rollout of cyber resilience centres. This began its journey back in January 2020. It's led by policing, but facilitated by Business Resilience International Management, and as a structured partnership with the regional policing, academia, business, third and public sector organisations. And it's based on the highly successful model that's been previously established for Scotland. So some of you might have heard of the Scottish Business Resilience Centre, and it's a more cyber-based version of that. You can sign up to be a core member free of charge, which I would encourage everybody to do, so you can see the information that comes out. It doesn't cost anything. There are then 3 further levels of membership which attract a fee, but you get additional add-on benefits to that. And as the Cyber Resilience Centre builds, they will be looking for industry experts. We're taking on board trusted partners and service delivery. So there are opportunities for your organisations potentially to be involved and to benefit from the Cyber Resilience Centre. So I really would urge you to pop along to their site, sign up for the core membership and see what's there for you to be getting involved with as well. Charles, did you want to cover these points again?
Yeah, no, gladly. And just want to say thank you everyone for the questions. I answered what I can. I'll do some more live. So the key takeaway messages for me is as simple as cybercrime is out there. It will affect you at some point. It's probably a large reason why yourselves are into area of business and have careers out of it. But actually, there are real simple acts that can protect you or mitigate any impact. And actually, it's just getting people to understand the very basic elements. You know, just because it's online, just because it's digital, doesn't mean that it's complicated. It can be really quite simple. We are taking this seriously as law enforcement. I think it's several years since we realised that this was not going to go away. I always use the joke that the internet wasn't going to get turned off. I'm sure there were certain bosses that thought that might happen, somewhat worryingly. So actually, we have well-resourced areas. We have real good access to specialists. We are not there to compete with industry. We are there to enhance it and work with it. So please do get involved with this. But we can only help if you help and if you encourage people to not only report, but also to, I guess, share your expertise, share your knowledge. You know, please let us know what's going on. And so the big requests from me on the next slide are, please report. We've spoken about action fraud. If anyone has had the misfortune of having to use it, you will find out it's rather clunky. It is not designed for businesses. I think that's fair to say. It was designed for individuals. It works for individuals. It is dreadful for businesses. It is changing dramatically. You will hear something come out through CISP, through various NCSC disseminations about Project Fortis. Project Fortis is up and running. I've got access to the beta site. It is purpose-built for business. It lets you update logs. It lets you send data in far bigger quantities. It understands that businesses don't have time to fill out lots and lots of paperwork when potentially they're losing lots of money. It's quite good. Please use CISP to share intelligence. I got more out of about one client out of CISP for the first 24 hours than I did out of the government. It was only then I could go into government and start to get some good details, and obviously a lot more detail from them. Don't just share bad things. Please share best practice. It's absolutely key that actually if we identify good ways of doing things, we share those. You know, multi-factor authentication a couple of years ago was seen as the devil. You know, oh, I've got my phone on me at all times. Oh, you know, it's just slowing things down. Well, actually, there's reasons behind it and why we should use it. Okay, don't hide what's happening. Too many do. I know it can be a customer confidence thing, but actually there's a lot more out there now of an understanding that this is happening. Please, I talked about the processes, the technology and the people. Please consider all 3. We've been into some superbly secure organisations that unfortunately haven't trained their staff how to either use the technology or their staff have realised technology doesn't work for them and they themselves have worked out ways of getting around it. That's not good, because with that comes inherent issues. And please engage with us at all levels, okay? You know, every police officer now has some level of training around digital awareness. But actually, if you can't speak to that person about things, you can't speak to your neighbourhood officer, come into my team, even if that is through your neighbourhood officer. Because actually we can work with you, be it myself, be it one of the detectives, be it Sam, or be it we go to a specialist to give you that level of understanding. We're not there to replace industry, we're there to enhance it and work with it. This is probably the most important slide on there. Someone's already asked about resources, and I've quite rightly said that Sam knows an awful lot of things. And even better, she knows where to get those things she doesn't know. So actually, feel free to get in contact with Sam or myself. We will happily share this information. Nothing we have is there just for kudos for us. The whole point is to get this information out there. So thank you ever so much, Colin. I'm happy to do any questions and answers, whatever works for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles and Samantha. That was a very sort of quick canter through a lot of topics there, but I think that was very useful. There have been a number of questions, and I guess one of them was very quickly was related to, you know, there are a lot of information with links on there, so we will look at exactly how we share those slides to all attendees. We will be writing a summary of the presentation up for the CySec Pulse magazine, and so if we can't share the slides for some reason, we will certainly look at putting them in that article. Behind the scenes, Charles has been busy answering quite a lot of the questions online. I think there are a couple that are still open if we've got just a few moments left, and two of them relate to ransomware. One is asking, do the police get involved in the decision-making process regarding paying ransoms? And there's a related question about, do the police track how many compromised organisations pay the ransoms, and if so, what proportionally, how many actually get their files back?
Okay, yeah, I can answer both of those, that's fine. I'll answer the first one first. Do we get involved in the decision-making process? And I think the answer there is only so much as the victim would like us to. So we will generally recommend or remind people that just because you pay a ransom does not mean you're going to get the result you want. I know of 3 or 4 agencies who have not involved us, have only involved us once the ransom has been paid, and then they've realised actually all they did was give money to an organised crime group without getting their data back. And also we have had where ransom has been paid, they've got all their things back, they didn't realise that the group was still within their network and was actually causing more grief. So we will only get involved to remind people that they might not get the stuff back and to remind people where some of this money might be going. We would never ever stop you paying the ransom if you needed to, because that might be a business decision. I think Sam's mentioned a couple of people actually did get their data back. We have in the past, in certain circumstances, used it as a technique or tactic where we will offer to do it on your behalf to either try and get the money down, because of these people trying to make money, but actually they realise they'd rather get paid than get nothing, or we can use it as a way of trying to speak at length to the people making demands to potentially identify where they're from. So hopefully that answers it a little bit. But the gist of it is we will never get in the way of it. We will offer advice only. And the second one was, yes, we do keep track of who pays, how much they pay, and if they get the result they expected. But I would suggest that a large number that pay, we never get told about, because the reporting is still really quite poor. And actually, a lot of companies, especially with cyber insurance, paying out for some of it, just see it as an occupational hazard, unfortunately. Which is a bit of a pain, because what it does mean is that I lose the intelligence and the understanding of what's going on. So hopefully that answers both parts.
Yes, thank you very much. There's one question related to CISP, but there's also a comment that sort of from Steve Thomas highly recommending CISP, and certainly something from my own experience from Nexor, it's something that we would recommend, that we use it as a very good source of threat intelligence for the services that we offer. But the one question is just more of an administrative one. The person asking the question says they're a business in Warwickshire, so how would they get sponsored?
There will be a counterpart of me in Warwickshire, and I will be able to find out who that is. So if they wanted to drop me an email just to prompt me to do that, I'll find out the relevant contact there. My email address, I don't know if you've got it already, is samantha.hancock@leicestershire.pnn, that's Papa November, .police.uk. But each force will have a cyber protect officer that should be able to help with sponsorship.
Thank you. The one final question, because I'm conscious of time, is actually one that I've seen on quite a few forums on the internet, and it relates to cyber essentials, and particularly COVID-19 and home working. that one of the questions for Cyber Essentials is that home routers must have their admin passwords changed, but from the default to be compliant. And that appears, from my understanding, to be a mandatory Cyber Essentials requirement, although the question is asking whether it is mandatory or not. But really, whether you had any views on that, because with a lot of people moving from office-based to home working, there's a potential that that's invalidated everyone's Cyber Essentials.
That's a really complicated question, and I'll be honest,
afraid it
I
is,
can't
yes.
answer it off the top of my head. What I will endeavour to do is to contact somebody who can confirm either way. I would hope in some regards there's been some fluidity for the unprecedented change that there's been, but I'll take that away nationally and inquire and be able to report back to you on that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Sam. So I have seen that discussed on various online forums as well, so it certainly is a hot topic, and certainly the forums that I've seen it on haven't come to an authoritative answer.
It's fair to say, Colin, that we've dealt with some quite large businesses that haven't even changed the default router admin, especially where they haven't had it set up by a IT company. They thought they've got a friend to set it up, and you have gone in there and found out the password was still password. And that's a bit of a worry when they then wonder why they've spent tens of thousands of pounds on physical security and training for staff, but still something's happened. So it's
Sure.
it's embarrassing, but it happens.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. So amazingly, we're approximately on time. So thank you very much to Sam and Charles for covering an awful lot of material and keeping on time. And thank you very much to Charles for sort of very insightful view of how the police operate, and Sam for some good insight into the types of crime that we're seeing, and some good advice around that. So yeah, thank you very much.
No,
one of the challenges with these online forums is you can't necessarily hear the round of applause because everyone's muted. But if they weren't muted, I'm sure there would be 50+ people now providing a very big round of applause.
Absolutely.
No, more than happy, and proud to be part of CSEC, so thank you ever so much.
No, thank you both so much. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Colin, as well for your involvement. We couldn't, produce webinars like this without you. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're stuck for time. We could probably go on for hours with everything we've discussed. But if there are questions that we haven't answered, do send those over to us, either to Sam or to events@cisec.org, and we can make sure we include maybe some answers to those in a write-up we're doing for Pulse. I know Colin's doing a write-up for our upcoming Pulse article.
Well, just as I mentioned, my co-collaborator on Dawn is going to be doing that for us. Yeah.
Apologies. Yes, Dawn is doing that for you. So yeah, please send those our way. But thank you both so much. And before we do go, thank you for joining. And I just want to make you aware of some of our other upcoming events that we are running. We've got our first innovation webinar that's coming up on the 30th of July, which is actually next Thursday. We're really excited to bring these webinars. There's something new that we've come up with, and I think they're a great opportunity. So if you haven't registered already, take a look at our website. There's loads of information, and if it's something you're interested in, please do register. If you're not, you don't have a CISEC account and you'd still like to join, as it's the first one, we are opening it up slightly. So just send me an email and I can make sure that you're signed up for that. We also have our next masterclass coming up on the 19th of August. That one's on 5G and is hosted by John Davis and Jason Davis from Cyber Wales. So with that being very topical at the minute, that's not one to miss either. So again, you can register on the website and find some more information there on that one. And as Sam said, the slide deck will be available afterwards. It will be sent out to all attendees, so don't worry, you won't miss anything in that respect. So I think that's all we have time for. Thank you all so much for joining, and thank you all for your involvement. And until next time, have a lovely evening and take care.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.